Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today we have Monica Frager as a guest, so welcome, Monica. And we'll be talking about guardrails and glass ceilings. So we'll mainly be discussing governance and compliance in procurement, but we're going to tie that in with the role of women in procurement, which I think is a really important subject. So welcome, Monica. If you want to do a quick introduction of yourself and your background, and then I'll do the same as well.
Thank you very much, Luke, for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica. I've been working in procurement for, I want to say maybe 15, but it's probably close to 20 years. It's a long time. I'm still enjoying it. I've been very lucky to have had lots of opportunities. And I've been working in private sector and public sector, mixture of the two, and more lately in public sector. Category manager for IT, software specifically, but also I've done sustainable procurement projects, and this is how I started in procurement. I will discuss that a little bit later on, but thank you very much, Luke.
No, thank you. And yeah, that's interesting with mainly being indirect. So sort of contrast to me, I've always been in private and always been direct. So originally started in a business that was then later acquired by RS Components, RS Group, looking after workplace safety. So that was anything from safety knives to first aid to spill control and everything in between. And then moved into telecoms, indirect procurement, and then back into RS Group now, but into integrated supply, so a different part of the business. So I look after a lot of MRO now, so fluid power, pneumatics, hydraulics, and pumps, everything that, if you get a conveyor belt, everything that goes into the conveyor belt that makes it work, but not the actual product. So it's been in procurement for about 7 years now, after a brief stint in AP and sales support. So yeah, I think I found my home career wise now. But yeah, no, thank you for that. That's fantastic.
It's interesting to hear how people got their route into procurement. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, that it is. So I know you said you've been in procurement for some time. Did you fall into it like most people, or?
I fell into it, definitely. Yeah, I fell into it. I went for a job interview when I was a graduate, and I did a master in environmental management. So it was very much about system, the economy, geography, sustainability, and I went in and I had to look up what procurement was, to be very frank. It was a long time ago, so procurement was not a word that you hear every day. And I thought, oh, I could do this. I thought, okay. And it was a project for Camden Council, and it was about sustainable procurement. And that's what got me into thinking about contract management, the procurement cycle, but also the benefit to the environment and local community by harnesses really public contracts. And there is a lot of roles at the moment around public sector procurement, but also how you leverage the public sector expenditure in a positive way. Now, that was a little project at the time, and there are so many, it's been duplicated so many times. So it's been very successful. But that was my route into procurement. I then moved on to doing some governance, and the governance part really is what I'm still doing. It's such a key part to why I do governance, contract management. But really, I fell into IT procurement, buying software, hardware, and that has stuck with me. It was one of those things that I'm not very IT or tech savvy at all. My family will tell you that I cannot figure out downloading apps on my phone or little things, but I found my niche, and I have absolutely loved working in IT procurement. And I then got another role and another role, and they look at my CV and, oh, IT procurement, IT suppliers. Yeah, I know someone, and then kind of went on from there. And governance is still something that I very much do, is at the core of what I do, because it's really such a main key part of my day-to-day job, really. But that has been my road into procurement, really. And yeah, some different organizations, most of them in London. So I've seen public sector, private sector, educational, lots of education organizations like universities, but also um, other sort of third parties that they are very much private. Although you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at the names, but they operate with a board and they are very much private sector oriented. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And if there's anything to be said about a career in procurement, is that it is so diverse across so many of my colleagues that might do procurement elsewhere. It is so different. So that is really fascinating to me.
No, 100%, and I agree. It's very diverse. And I think as time's gone on, there's definitely more. Even within procurement, you've got different roads, haven't you? Like your governance and transformation, ESG and sustainable procurement, and then category management. Yeah, no, fully agree. So yeah, it seems like indirect software procurement is sort of the similar string to what I've done with direct and private. So yeah, that'd be good to discuss some of the comparisons.
Do you find that you have in your roles, you've got a key set of suppliers that you have sort of got a stronger relationship with them and you manage them, even if you've got a different role somewhere else, just because they're the key players in this area? Has that happened to you?
I suppose to an extent, yeah. I think because although I've always been direct and private, I've sort of jumped about from different industries. So started off in safety, then went to telecoms, and now in MRO. So, however, I do, even though I've moved from safety to MRO, I have actually not the same suppliers, but the same contacts have jumped to different industries as well. I've seen that a couple of times, and a couple of ex-colleagues,
Mm.
suppliers as well now. So it's, yeah, in a sense, although not by going, I'll call X, Y, and Z because they're that's what they do. It's more people, which is really nice because it's seeing other people. I've seen other people grow and move into different industries and roles as well. So it's been really nice actually. So whereas we're not always directly in the same work stream, it's nice to go, oh hello, and yeah. So yeah, in a sense, but probably more in a personal capacity than a professional capacity. But yes, drawing on the governance, I know you talked about governance and your experience within that. What would be interesting to sort of know is, in your experience, is there a line between where governance is necessary and it's productive and it drives results, and what you could argue might be perceived as cumbersome and preventative rather than rather than progressive, if you see what I mean? Do you think there's a line between achieving that balance?
I think there's definitely a line, and having done this role now in different capacity, I think I'm very strong on my governance. I absolutely am very process driven. And I think if you work in a public sector organization, governance, it's a must. So your documentation, your paperwork, your processes need to be well maintained. And you really want to have, should any auditors pick up anything, ask any question, 6, 12 months down the line, you want to make sure that you got your documentation, all your evidence still written and written well in a way that it's clear, visible, transparent. So I'm very strong on my governance, and I will always advocate to anyone, make sure you keep your paperwork and all your documentation and it's neat, it's tidy. Don't forget it. It is time consuming and it eats times out of a procurement exercise. It really does, but it's worth. It will save your if you save you at
Yeah.
the point of auditing.
I know,
Um,
100%. It's a really good point you make, and
mm,
it's a necessary, not a necessary evil. That sounds really bad. It's
But it
cumbersome but
is in a sense,
necessary.
yeah. And also, I would forget 6 months down the line, I forgot why some of the rationale was applied to that, and that supplier was selected. I mean, not forget, but you do forget the little details. It's good if you write them down and you keep a note of everything. So I'm very strong on my processes. I think when you work in a private sector, I've seen that tend to be not as essential. And I think where governance, yes, it's very light touch. And it works, it can work. It makes the whole procurement a bit more agile. It makes the procurement process go faster. Just going to give you some example. If you're running a procurement exercise, whether it's an RFI or a tender, in the public sector, it is very convoluted. And I've been running them for IT. So we buy IT platform, softwares, hardware, and our requirements are very thorough. But there's also several key stakeholders in the procurement process that you need to rely on, like your technical team, to check that the requirements are fit for purpose, they match to what we actually want. But also there's the digital accessibility, and there are several requirements now with the WCAG 2.2, I think it is now. And if you're buying a platform that is being used by students or third parties, you absolutely need to have all that visibility and that accreditation from the supplier that you're going to be contracting with. And then you have things like credit checks, trying to just check what the financial well-being of a company, and the credit checks help, so it's another step that I always advocate for taking. You also now with the cybersecurity essential and all those accreditation, you've got to have your pen test done, and it's always interesting how some suppliers say yes, no problem, we'll let you have even our report, or some supplier let you sign an NDA, and they just kind of drag their feet a little bit. So the due diligence and the governance process is very vast, and it's much more than just keeping your documentation. It's really about engaging all those third parties, which are in essence my colleagues, my stakeholders, and it's as I said, process. I will always advocate for a robust governance. I think the difference in the private sector that maybe those steps are a little bit more agile. They're a bit faster, and there's pros and cons. I think going back to the question that you asked, a tender in a public sector, depending on what you buy, but it could be several months before you actually go to award. And in that time, the original bid that the supplier submitted, and if you are evaluating, obviously you are evaluating on a cost criteria as well, and you might go for that supplier that it's a little bit better value for money, but that original bid might be only valid for 3 months. By the time you've done all your steps and your due diligence and you have selected your preferred supplier, but that bid needs to be then you got to go back to the supplier again and ask them to requote, because it's kind of almost gone out of date. And I've seen that a few times, not very often. Often you find suppliers that are willing to keep that price, fine, but if it's been 4 or 5 months since, there would be a little increase, which it's understandable. So I think in the private sector, there is that willingness to secure that best commercial deal, and that takes over the governance. So if you could get that, we need to sign that contract on by Friday. But if you've only just started a due diligence, your governance, it's beginning of the week on Monday, you really are going to fast forward speed, fast forward all of those other steps. And in a sense, I've seen contracts being signed in the private sector where those steps haven't taken place yet, but you are just postponing, and we're signing the contract now because we need to secure this. But the cybersecurity and the pen test is going to be done next week. The digital accessibility team are doing some testing, but we don't know the outcome of that. There will be remediation. We'll address it then. In the public sector, that does not. There are certain processes and they need to follow. So there's a little bit more strictness in how the process is being done. And for the good and the bad, there are benefits in both. But certainly, I think if you're very commercially driven, the private sector, it's a lot faster, and therefore you're always after that deal in essence,
Yeah, no, 100%. It does sound like, from what you're saying, it does sound like there needs to be more, like when you were saying about, yeah, it's very good about the documentation and keeping that together. Although it's processes, it needs to be people-led processes. It's applying that logic behind it, isn't it, to sort of make it productive.
The other thing is, and it got me thinking, it's about also the size of a procurement team. And I think if you got unlimited resources, if you got a team of, I don't know, 4 or 5 people running a tender, you can be agile, even in a public sector. I think that the issue is that if it's 1 or 2 people and you're running a procurement exercise, you're really kind of, because you got your business as usual at the same time, so that the world doesn't stop just because you're running a tender. But you've got to be either providing some training to your stakeholders, and I think just giving them some basic commercial understanding of what you're looking for, the do's and don'ts of procurement. I found that sometimes, particularly in university, a supplier will call an academic, and they know that there is a need to buy a particular software. And there's almost like the academic has agreed and the contract is already signed, or the order is already signed, but there's been no procurement due diligence whatsoever. So there's been no even basic training on who can sign the contract, what is the delegation of authority of an organization. But also, when you're then doing a tender, giving a little bit of training to your stakeholders in how you're scoring suppliers. And it doesn't have to be a very lengthy training. It could just be a conversation, a quick demo, 15, 20 minutes, where you give them some basic do's and don'ts. That kind of thing, I think, will help anyone with limited resources in a public sector, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly. And when you say about going back to when you say about team size, I suppose it's about proportionality, isn't it? Really, like you say. No, that's great. Thank you. It's definitely one for our listeners to digest. I think it's really great stuff. Moving on to the other segment of today's episode, the role of women in procurement. So this is something I'm hoping to speak to a few guests about, because I think it's definitely something that needs talking more about, and different perspectives and opinions. So I suppose my first question to you is, do you think the number of women in procurement is increasing? And if so, would you also agree that the senior leadership roles are still disproportionately male-led?
Such interesting questions, look, but I'm so glad we are talking about it. And thank you again for putting this question forward. I think in my years of having done procurement, I've definitely seen more women joining procurement as a career choice, or maybe they've fallen into procurement very much like I did. But that number of women has grown. And I was very curious about this myself, and I actually looked it up. I think it was several months ago, but I think SIPs have got some interesting stats. And they are recording, I think it's a 39% over 41%. So 39% are generally female now. So there's still the majority, we're still seeing male in as a career dominated roles, but we are seeing more women. So that proportion of women is increasing, which is absolutely great. And I really would like to advocate for procurement as a career choice, because it is such a diverse career. I will never be tired of saying this. Depending on what you choose to do, which sector, even what category management you're willing to, you're going to be working in. If it is, as I said, HR will be different from IT, services will be different again from estate or FM, and public sector will be very different from a private sector. It is such a dynamic career choice that is so interesting, because you'll be looking at contracts, you'll be talking to suppliers, you'll be attending a demonstration, you've been scoring and you'll be awarding, you'll be talking to people and colleagues. And I would absolutely promote this career to anyone. So if any young school leavers or university graduates that are listening to this, I would absolutely advocate to take this up. I would love to see more women. And I think women in particular that got more some of the softer skills and negotiation especially, they'll be particularly suitable to a career in procurement. And I think they would do absolutely great. With regards to the other question, the follow-up question about leadership and female leaders, I think the seats at the very top table, there's still a disproportionate number of male candidates or male colleagues. I think things are changing. We're certainly talking about that change and those differences, which I think helps. But I think for the vast majority, there's maybe one or two directors' role that are females. The majority of the board is still made up of the usual white, middle age, if I can say that in a way that I'm not offending anyone, absolutely, but it's not as diverse as I would have liked in 2025.
Yeah.
The reason for that, there are absolutely many. What is your take on that?
So I agree with you, and 100%. And speaking from my experience, I have worked with a number of people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different genders. The majority of my managers since I've been in procurement have been female. And one thing I can say from working with a diverse team of, as I said, different genders, ethnicities, etc., and cultural backgrounds, is it enriches a team. And so, from my opinion, the more women in the field, the more people of colour, the more people from different, countries and economic backgrounds as well. I've always prided myself on being working class, and I think there's a certain not a Del Boy aspect, but there's a certain outlook I can bring as well. For me, the more people more diverse the team, the more enriched the results, I think. And going to the question about senior leadership, I know exactly what you mean. I think there are a lot of organisations, where it is still heavily disproportionate. I'm quite fortunate in my organisation that there is really good equal representation. But I think, across the board, generally speaking, there's definitely a lot of work to do. And I suppose tying into that, obviously I like to speak to people, a first-hand experience of it. I'm not going to sit here and preach to people because at the end of the day, I'm a white male. I've not lived through it. So I suppose speaking as a young male, what could we do as men in procurement to sort of take practical steps, both organisationally and individually, to create a bit, a more supportive environment and an inclusive environment, really, to sort of support and sort of, enable more women to have that opportunity and sort of make things more equitable.
It's a great question, and I think we need male colleagues and across the board to talk about this. So that the fact that you're raising that as a question is fantastic. I think also talking, if you're ever in a position where you are in a meeting and you're seeing women's colleagues that maybe they're not being valued, and I know it's difficult to really pinpoint exactly what I'm saying, but if you are all in a group of people in the same meeting and the woman's point of view is not being listened, or suddenly there's the same thing is being said by a male candidate, and then, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But yet the female said that 2 seconds ago, and that was kind of unnoticed. So I think it's great to point out those little incidences, because as little as they are the one that make an impact and really could be almost crushing to someone who just had the courage to speak up and say something, and then it's not being listened and not being picked up. So little incidences like that, I think, is great. But also, if you discuss with your organization more opportunity, how can we broaden and really attract more women into the sector, having internships, perhaps, or shadowing opportunities, even with colleagues in other sectors, and those kind of things. I think obviously it's always difficult to select gender, and you don't want to be overly sort of compensating either. But I think just having this discussion, the fact that we are talking, and how we attract diversity in general, because I think, procurement is so close to finance. There's a strong link with you got to work so close with your finance team. I think it wasn't that long ago when I would walk into the finance office, the finance department, it would be almost entirely the floor of senior middle management that would be white male. But yet in payrolls, or where the sort of more junior roles, there would be more women. And it's changing. It really is changing. So I think I'm hopeful that just by discussing it, and by this topic being, the more people talk about it, it just makes you think. And I know that also how you recruit is important. Having a diverse recruitment board, recruitment panel, it's important, because it is so easy to recruit what you look like. To sort of give a job to somebody that looks just like you, and you're thinking, I can relate to that person. That it is an unconscious bias, but I think it's one that people fall into it so easily, perhaps without even realizing they're doing so.
Yeah, it's like a reflection, isn't it? Really, I know exactly what you mean.
Mirroring, I think it's called mirroring.
Mirroring, yeah, no, it is. No, it is. It's a very good point. So I suppose one of the things we could do, like you said, it is moving in the right way. Certainly in my time in procurement, although it has been, only 7 years, it's definitely quite a diverse landscape, which is absolutely fantastic. And as I said before, I think it's having people of different backgrounds and traits and personalities, etc., definitely brings something unique to the table, and it brings, diverse thinking. But like you say, it does still need, there is still some work to do. And I suppose one thing I would just say, based on what you've said, Monica, for any of my male listeners / watchers, is call out injustice, I suppose, when you see it. It's just being honest and not letting things slide.
Yeah. And it's difficult. I appreciate it's difficult. But again, if it happened to you, wouldn't you want somebody in your corner that called it out?
Exactly.
And I think it happens to women for generations. And I think we're almost, it's difficult to speak up, because you don't want to be seen as somebody who, oh gosh, you see, I'm the one that raises issues all the time. But these things do happen. And I think if a male colleague sees that, yeah. But as I said, also just to really reinforce the positive, shadowing opportunities to anyone that wants to have a career in procurement, and mentoring, offering mentorships. I think that is so great. I know that there's a lot of good stuff happening in the private sector around that, with apprenticeships and mentoring opportunities. And I understand it applies to all, but it's absolutely great.
No, 100%, 100%. And I came into, I started my professional career as an apprentice, and I think probably I could probably do a whole episode on that, to be fair. But there's definitely its merits versus, I'm doing my master's degree now, but that wasn't how I got into procurement. I got into it through an apprenticeship, through practical experience, and I think qualifications are fantastic. But I think again, that's the diverse thinking. It's people who have got to where they are in different ways. Like, I used to know people who have been graduates, and whereas I, sort of worked out as starting off as basically the T-boy, and worked my way up that way. And I think it just brings different perspectives, which is fantastic either way. But yeah, no, Monica, this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been a really good conversation, and a really good mix of things, governance and sort of the role of women in procurement. So a really, really diverse episode, no pun intended. And yeah, no, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I think you've been absolutely great, and thank you very much for inviting me. But also I want to say you've been really great. I've looked at your career on LinkedIn. You're just very promising, and it's I'm really excited for your career and what you got, the next steps, and for setting this up. I mean, it's a lot of people talk about I want to do a podcast, but you actually went ahead and did it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, very, very, very off the cuff, but I love talking to people. I love talking. I think I said to you before I started recording that, the first episode where I did it on my own, I was talking to myself for 40 minutes. I had to question my sanity after that point, talking to myself for that long. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and all the best, and hope to talk another time.
You too.